The Serenity Prayer was written by American theologian Reynold Niebuhr. The prayer was made popular through publications of Alcoholics Anonymous, but what you may not know is that in 1944, it was published in a book of prayers and services for the armed forces, which connects this prayer not only to Montana Wildhack and her alcoholic mother, but to Billy's experiences in the war as well. If a Tralfamadorian were to walk into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, they would have no problem fulfilling the first part of the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. The Tralfamadorians could relate to accepting the things that they cannot change, as their ability to see in 4 dimensions tells them exactly what their whole life is going to be like up to and including their death. The next 2 lines of the prayer, however, is where it gets kinda sticky. Courage to change the things I can. Well, if nothing can be changed, doesn't that make courage kinda useless? Billy isn't a particularly courageous person. The only reason he doesn't fear dying in the war is because he already knows that he isn't going to. When Billy asks the Tralfamadorians if they can't try to prevent the end of the universe because they know how the universe will end, they laugh at him. They think it's a stupid question. No amount of courage can change the events that have been laid out until the end of time, and it would be an exercise in futility to even try. The 3rd line of the prayer, and the wisdom always to tell the difference, brings up the question of free will, which the Tralfamadorians also think is a little silly. Applying the 4th dimension to this last line nullifies the whole prayer because there is no difference between what you can and cannot change. Now, I don't know about you, but if I started to see every moment of my life simultaneously and realized that I couldn't do anything about it, I would lose my mind. So why doesn't Billy? Well, there's actually another verse to the Serenity Prayer, but only the first 3 lines can fit on a coin, so that's what most people know. The 2nd verse goes, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life, and supremely happy with you forever in the next. At first glance, this verse seems to contradict the Tralfamadorian point of view. How can one live one day at a time when you see every day all at once? Billy achieves the peace that would come from living one day at a time, not by surrendering his will to God, but by accepting his powerlessness and choosing to focus on whatever moments of his life that he chooses. And when you think about it, aren't those 2 things pretty similar? Billy may not be supremely happy in the next life, as it turns out the only thing that comes after death is just purple? He is reasonably happy to live a fairly average life on Earth where nothing can surprise him, and he feels no real sense of responsibility for anything because nothing can be changed. And when I say average, I mean minus the alien abduction. Science and religion are often portrayed to be at odds with each other, which I find ironic because at their core, they're both asking the same question. What is going on, and what do I do about it? Well, the Tralfamadorians would say, do nothing, because that's all that can be done. But unfortunately, that doesn't really work for us poor 3D beings. At first I was shocked when Billy didn't try to dissuade his son from joining the Green Berets, because he knows what war can do to a person. But then I realized, of course, he didn't try to do anything about it. There is nothing to be done. Nearing the end of the book, Montana Wildhack makes a comment that's described as Tralfamadorian and guilt-free. I think it's super important that these 2 things are put on the same level as one another. Billy Pilgrim and Kurt Vonnegut both survived an awful, terrifying conflict where many of their peers did not survive. So it goes. It's not uncommon for people who survive such horrors to experience survivor's guilt, but being able to see in 4 dimensions purges Billy of that guilt. Billy doesn't feel guilty about letting his son go to Vietnam or surviving a plane crash because he's surrendered his will to the 4th dimension in exchange for happiness. And that is exactly what the Serenity Prayer asks you to do. Ridding oneself of misplaced guilt is a huge part of the healing process, which is why it's so focused on in Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs. This works out pretty conveniently for Billy. It lets him live a normal life after the war despite everything he's seen. But it is not so convenient to those around him who think he is insane. Whether he is insane or not is A, up to interpretation, and B, pretty irrelevant, because regardless, the philosophy remains the same. Regardless of how many dimensions you see in or what greater power you surrender your will to, I think the Serenity Prayer offers some pretty solid advice.